have those kind of experience. Sometimes when I see a picture, I feel shocked or feel nervous at the very beginning, and then quickly I can control my own mind. I can pretend to calm down, and I can, interact, my thinking. So this is a stage. Okay, so you have bypassed the early stage, and now you can control and interference your thinking. So in our specific case, we argue that we'll particularly focus on the phase 2, from the 150 millisecond to the 600 millisecond, about this area. So this is our region of interest. Now we can show that this is the experiments based on different subjects, and we do that in different sessions. And for the same person, we have very close pattern. We have very close ERP pattern. And for different persons, we have distinct the ERP pattern. This is the fundamental rationale. And now I can give some examples what kind of pictures or video we can use to trigger those ERP. So this is one example, the different faces, the faces of celebrities. So for those cases, and some psychology study, they say our left and right orbital frontal cortex, they have the capability to respond differently to those different faces. And another example is the food. The food primarily dominated by the ventral midbrain system. So to differentiate the different kind of the food, your response to that. And what our goal is try to identify the most effective stimuli set, and then we want to direct people into individually distinct sequence of the brain states. Okay, that's our job. Now, I want to borrow the 5 minutes. I would need 5 more minutes to talk about our poster. The recent paper published on TIFS transaction. This is the paper. So in that paper, we discussed our protocol in details and how we acquire those kind of signals. So we did a study based on 33. Now our pool grew to more than 50. So we did study based on 33, adult participants, and then we collected the EEG in the frequency of 500 hertz, and then we have 6 categories of visual stimuli, 6 categories of visual stimuli, and then we look at the up to 30 channels of the EEG signals. Now for this data acquisition, the stimuli, the 6th category of the stimuli, one is sign greetings, because this is identified the most effective visual stimuli in psychology society, to trigger different, human responses. And we also test some words, and we tested the black-white food, the color food, and black-white celebrities, and audible color targets. We mix everything. But anyway, so the ultimate goal is try to use different visual stimuli to trigger your unique response, and for each individual person, and we use that as the brain biometrics. This is some background about this. Now, in this specific paper, what we did is focus on the computational attack. Like any other biometric system, we want to investigate the vulnerability from the attacker perspective. So I want to repeat the general attack model. So it's quite similar to any to other biometrics. But there is one unique thing for the brain print, different from the conventional biometrics, is for the conventional biometric, no matter the fingerprint or iris, our goal is try to identify if the input pattern is exactly, input pattern exactly matches the template stored in the system. So we would like to see the exact match. And sometimes the challenge for the conventional, biometric system, biometric recognition system is if the fingerprint is not perfect, the sensor is not perfect, it introduces some noise and something like that, and we have to remove those noise and try to find if the input pattern matches the template. But for the brain print, although we have seen very high similarities among your thinking activity, among all your ERPs in response to the same stimuli, but we need to understand that for the brain waves, you cannot have exactly identical copies. Why? Because you think about the way the brainwave is generated. So the brainwave primarily will be triggered and evoked by the visual stimuli present to you, but there are some underlying noises and the different factors affected by the environmental things. For example, I give you one simple example. When you close your eye, try to keep concentrated on one thing in your mind, But you may think of, okay, this is the way I'm thinking about it right now. But some background noise, the change of the light illuminations, and someone pass away, stop by, go through your back hallway or something like that. Any of those factors may change. It may slightly change your brain waves. So those things, those factors will serve as some different kind of noise. Given this case, so in brainwave biometric case, if you find an exactly identical input pattern, that may be wrong. That may be invalid input. Why? Because it can be easily a replay attack. Why? Because for the general person, during different time period, you cannot have exactly the same brain response, the same brainwave patterns. So for this case, for this uniqueness for the brain biometrics, we try to investigate, okay, the one, intuitive strategy people may ask, okay, if I opt in your, brainwave pattern, what I can do is I can inject some noise to emulate the case. Or it seems like, okay, this one is naturally generated. It's not artificial. This one is naturally generated slightly different from the original one. So our job is try to identify, given any input brainwave pattern, our job is try to identify if this slight difference is caused by the nature generated brainwave or is artificially injected noise or some other ways. So this is what we want to achieve. And then our architecture is we have the regular, the CNN, the convolutional neural network as a classifier. We have the replay detector, is the artifacts detector. So for the, the CNN is a very popular classifier right now. I won't want to repeat again. So for the CNN, we try to extract different features through the unsupervised learning manner. Okay, they explicitly extract those different features, actually serve as those, the filters. Now we can see that for the way why CNN is more powerful than the existing classifier, because the existing classifier, we have to manually extract those features. But for CNN, we extract those features, through the unsupervised manner. We do that through the unsupervised manner, and then we can see that the reconstruction quality is pretty high based on those automatically extracted the features. And also for the noise residue, and we adopted an approach, normally used in the medium forensics areas, and then we use the noise residue, and we find that for the EEG signals and the correlation between the neighbor samples is very high. And we use the first order and the second order residue samples. And then we try to get the histogram of the noise residue features. And we can see that when we apply the different level of noises, and they show very different, different patterns for from the histogram of the noise residue. And we developed the replay detector using the ensemble classifier. And also we have the low-level noise detector. Because the case, if you have, intuitively when we think about it, if you inject a noise, randomly inject noise, and if the noise level is extremely low, the noise level is extremely low, and it will be very challenging to detect those kind of noise because it's very slightly different from the stored pattern. So we have also the low-level noise, detector, and based on the general statistical distribution of those, the general statistical distribution of those, brainwave data, and combined together, we try to the entire rationale of the study is, first one, know exactly. You keep remember that know exactly identical brain waves even for the same person and the same visual stimuli. That's the key. Now, the replayed ERP should be different from the original ERP template even for a very short period of time. And given that, and we add noise, we do a study. The left part is false acceptance rate, FAR. We can see that false acceptance rate means that if I provided some artifact, the spoofed artifact, ERP patterns, and how likely it will be, classified as the valid, the EEG pattern. So we see that if without this detector, the regular CNN classifier will most likely classify all of them, correctly think about, okay, this is the valid input, the ERP. And now with the classifier, we have the CNN combined with the ensemble, the green line. When the noise level is extremely small and this method doesn't work well. Okay, when the noise level is reasonable, yes, it can filter out most of the case, the spoofed case. But when the noise level is extremely low, means that, okay, there are only very slight difference between the artifact ERP pattern and the valid ERP pattern, and it doesn't work. And then, but we see that based on the combination of all three of them, we have the CNN classifier, the ensemble classifier, plus the low noise level detector, and combined together, we see that the false acceptance rate is very good. So we can see basically we can filter out and detect all those artifacts, all those spoofed inputs that are manually generated by injecting some small level of noise. And on the other side is the true acceptance rate. The true acceptance rate, because this is the basic fusion approach, and to see that if we only have those, if we rely on the combination of those cases, and sometimes we will have decreased true acceptance rate. That means that unavoidably there is a conflict. So if you have those, the detector, the replay detector, it will mistakenly to classify those true ERP patterns into the false ERP patterns. So this is the problem right now. So we can see that when the noise level is very low and we have reduced the true acceptance rate, and then the result is quite consistent across all of our different the visual stimuli. And then the conclusion. The conclusion is we use this first order and second order noise residue feature can capture the dependency among the neighboring brainwave samples, and the proposed replay detector can successfully recognize the counterfeit brainwaves. All right, so our study has been supported by NSF through 2 major grants, and this is a collaborative work between the computer engineering and the psychology. So it's a very good example of the interdisciplinary research. Okay, please feel free to ask any questions. Thank you so much.
So here there was 2 talks, so one for the main talk and also for the TIFS paper. So we have time for questions. Yes, Patrizio.
So I have one question about the convolutional neural network you're using. Usually to work well, they need to be very well trained. So I was wondering which kind of training do you do for the CNN?
Your question is which kind of training?
Yes, do you do for the CNN, for the network you're using?
Yeah, the CNN, I think, the CNN itself is a supervised learning. Yeah, so we have the labeled data. But when I talk about the unsupervised learning is for the feature part. The feature part is explicitly to extract all those filters, the filters and represent the feature obtained based on the EEG data. Okay, so we train the CNN just using the labeled data, mean that, okay, this brainwave belongs to, one subject, and then this will be the classifier results. Okay, the human subject labels will be the results.
So you feed the network with the word signal belonging to the subject?
Yes.
Okay, how long it is?
The number of layers in the CNN or the size?
The signal, you feed the...
Oh, the signal, we use the raw signal. So, I think of 550 samples, the input. That is 1 second. Yeah, 1 second data.
And another question is, so you mentioned that you were using an acquisition system with 30 electrodes.
Yes.
So can you localize, the response of the brain according to the stimuli that are...
Okay, yeah, that's a good question. Actually, in our TIFS, the transaction paper, so we discussed that we use the raw 30 electrons, basically cover every area of the brain. But eventually, given our study is also consistent with our hypothesis, is the most important part is the backbrain part. The backbrain part is visual cortex, as well as the slightly left part is the, this region is responsible for the semantic, semantic association. Mean that, okay, when you present the figures, images, and also the context, So that primarily rely on the visual cortex as well as the semantic, interpretation regions. The semantic part is basically the where, to interpret some sort of the memory. And the visual cortex part is try to associate the visual information acquired from your eyes and then here to provide the non-volitional, response for that.
Other questions? Yes.
I don't know much about brain science, so apologize if that question is stupid. The general idea is to use some secret thoughts as some kind of password stuff. But to my knowledge, it seems like in the case of brain or thoughts, if I say don't think of an elephant, then it's actually the same as thinking about an elephant. So if we are using the thoughts as a secret, then say like, please don't think about the secret, but you will eventually think about it. Mm-hmm. Then how do you tackle these kind of issues?
Yeah, that's the one thing, I mentioned in the presentation. That's the conventional way people start to, I think about 10 years ago, people started to look at the EEG signals as, biometrics. So the conventional way they do is what we call the past thought. The past thought is I ask you to think about or not to think about something. So this is still controlled by the user. But here in this specific case, I can tell you the difference. So the difference is non-volitional response is only invoked by the external stimuli. So for example, if I quickly shuffle the image, very quickly, like 1 second per image, in front of you, you can hardly see any content on this image, but your eye can still quickly capture the most important region of interest. Different person will capture different regions. Why? Because if I show the entire picture in front of you only within 1 second, you don't have the capability to read every single piece, but your eye will immediately capture one spot. Okay, this spot, which spot you are going to capture is closely related to your own unique memory and experience. For example, if I picture contains so many different animals, but assuming that I'm very sensitive to dog, assuming I was bitten by a dog when I was young. So I will be very sensitive to this specific animal. And when you present a picture contain different animals, I can immediately capture, oh, there is a dog, I'm scared. You understand that this is what we call a non-volitional way. And by quickly shuffling the pictures and the different content, and that will invoke the most intuitive response based on brain, because your brain will trigger that information much faster, than what you think about.
Yeah, okay.
This is related to actually this response, so maybe I can ask this quickly. In image processing, there's a concept of visual attention.
Yeah.
And of course, this suggests that most people will focus on the same thing because it's somehow salient across the background. So actually, this seems to suggest that for many people, the thing they look at first is going to be highly correlated. Mm-hmm. So is there enough entropy to distinguish the behaviors here?
Oh yeah, I think that's something slightly different from conventional the image processing part. Maybe let me explain this way, because our key, as you can see from those visual stimuli I presented before, you will see that so those pictures are relatively quite simple. It's not any complicated, the pictures. And in this case, for example, something like this or something like this, only a face. So the only way we try to do that is we try to, capture, your unique response to those visual stimuli. Not like see, okay, you are very sensitive to this eye or this nose. No. So when you quickly capture the entire content of this stimuli, and I can give you one example. Maybe you like this person or you don't like this person. You like this food or you don't like this food. So this is the very general, the rationale behind that.
Mm-hmm. One last question there.
I know that in your talk you mentioned that disclaimer of healthy mental conditions, that more and more people are suffering from different kinds of chronic mental disorders like Parkinson's or Alzheimer's disease. How would those impact the performance using brain waves as a biometric?
Okay, yeah, that's very good. And actually, I have to acknowledge that for the brain print biometrics, there are two key limitations or disadvantage. Number one concern people is how stable your brain waves over time. And we are currently working on that. We collect the database. Right now is up to 1.5 years. And as we can imagine, that is pretty stable. Why? Because for those fundamental memory and knowledge, you cannot suddenly change them over one night. So you gradually build up your memory and knowledge over a long period of time, but you are changing, you are evolving, you are changing. So the accuracy will slightly decrease. According to our experiment, after 1.5 years, it will reduce like to 80 to 90%. But like any other biometric system, you can easily recalibrate the system. Why? So just presenting different visual stimuli set, and you can recalibrate the system, get a new set of the brainwave. The second question is how resistant and stable of the brain print over different emotional states. I would describe, differentiate that into two categories. One is some random emotional state. For example, today I got grade A, I'm very happy. Tomorrow, I was late, I'm late, so I'm a little bit upset or whatever. So this is random, emotional state that will serve as another layer of noise, just like, the external background change. So they will serve as the noise. But there are something we cannot predict is some sudden fundamental event to your life. For example, it's a bad example. For example, if one of my most close friends or family members pass away, so that may fundamentally change my emotional state over the next few days or even next few months or years. So for this specific case, we have no way to know that. Just, we have to retrain the system because your emotional state fundamentally changes the way you are thinking about and how you are reacting to the world. So this is the problem. All right.
Okay.
Thank you.
Let's thank the speaker again. So the next and last speak will be about keystroke authentication. So let me just. So the title is Effect of Text Filtering on Authentication Performance of Keystroke Biometrics. And the speaker is Mr. Dekinhu, right? Dachinhu? Sorry.
Yeah, I know. I couldn't find it. It was here, right? Oh, sorry. Thank you. Yeah, thank you for the introduction. My name is Dachin Ho. Think of Q as CH in Charlie. And this work is about the quality of keystroke dynamics. Specifically, we collect a larger data set, and we found that when people play games or they simply type gibberish text, the performance of the keystroke biometrics is not degrade. It's not as good as previously claimed in the literature. So this is the joint work between Clarkson University and SUNY Buffalo. So this is well known that biometrics identify individuals by physiological or behavior characteristics. Specifically, keystrokes is one kind of behavior biometrics. So keystrokes, to put it simply, keystroke authentication basically utilizing how we type, the typing rhythm to identify individuals. And interesting that the idea of keystroke authentication is has a long, very long history. Even in World War II, telegraph operator knows that different operator they tap differently, and they have used that to tell who would be the operator for a certain message. Even within the computer age, the first experiment on computer keyboard authentication was conducted 4 decades ago. So people have tried to use keystroke to protect passwords. So in addition to passwords, they also track how you type your passwords, and in that way, we increase the reliability of passwords. So in general, keystroke are non-intrusive, inexpensive, and more importantly, because keystrokes are available all the time. Unlike password, you authenticate at one point. Keystroke is, so long as people are typing, you can always authenticate. So this offer an opportunity for continuous active authentication, and this is especially attractive for defending things like insider threats. And the key feature in keystroke authentication is called n-graph durations. So we can have monograph or diagraph. Diagraph meaning two consecutive case, or even trigraphs. And basically, we monitoring how long it takes for people to type each graph. Of course, people have also tried use other features in combination with n-graph durations, such as the frequency of typos, the habit of using some additional case. But for this work, we focus on n-graph durations. And in general, there are two kinds of input for keystroke dynamics. One is called static, another called dynamic. So static, in static case, the subject are asked to type predetermined fixed text, repeatedly, type the same text, and to train a classifier. In the dynamic case, there's no such limitation. People can, type whatever they like to type. They like to in the most natural setting. So we're going to focus on the second. There are more work on the first category, but there are also a substantial amount of work in the second category. But in general, so far in the literature, most of the work, almost all the work, repeatedly showing that this is a promising idea. But we believe that what's needed is, to establish really large data set and then, validate, revalidate the existing claim. So, for example, for the dynamic free text keystroke dynamic authentication, so this is a state-of-the-art algorithm by two Italian authors, Gonnetti and Picardi, and they, based on a data set of 40 users, and each user contribute about 11,000 keystrokes, and then another 145 imposter users, each of them contribute one imposter samples, and they report a false acceptance rate of 0.005%, and then false rejection rate of less than 5%. So this is a very good results, but nobody, since the publication of this work, nobody has revalidated these results. And using our larger data set, we were surprised to see that even by just replicating their algorithm, we could not get the same results. And that led to the investigation of this paper. So we tried to figure out, what caused the worst result, worst performance, for our data set. And we conclude that it's mainly due to the data quality problem, okay, which is the the main result of this work. So in the rest of the talk, I'm going to briefly introduce our data collection, how we collect data, and then how do we identify gibberish text from the data and then filter them out. And the idea is very simple. So after we filter them out, we compare the performance of the algorithm before and after the filtering. Okay, and then finally we report the evaluation result. So we develop a keylogger for Windows, which log every keystrokes the user type, but also in addition we also log the mouse movement. But in this paper we're focused on the the keystrokes. And what is worth emphasizing is that our logger has allows completely uncontrolled data collection. So we do not ask user any questions. User just, work as if the logger does not exist. But we do provide them option to, to stop the logger if they want, for, to protect their privacy. When the data collection is still ongoing, our goal is to collect, between 100, 200 users' data. When we wrote this paper, we have 60 users. That's about half a year ago. We have 60 users. Right now we have close to 100 users. And then on average, each user, the data, for each user each user contribute on average 21 hours of typing, and over, almost 2 years of period of time. And here is the distribution of amount of data contributed by the different users, and 38 users contribute more than 11,000 keystrokes. Okay, and there are 20 users contribute less than 11,000 keystrokes. So this shows that our data set is larger than the previous study by Gunati and Picardi. And then, as I said, we quickly test. We really implemented their algorithm, and we test the performance, and we get much worse performance than previously published. So that triggered us to look into the data, and then we found some patterns of what we call gibberish text, basically not normal typing. There are 4 categories. Sometimes people just seem to be pressing the same key without releasing. Okay. And then the second category, a lot of us should be familiar that people are playing game. When people play a game, they use ASDW and the space key. That's a major category. And then distinct. Sometimes people type a string with very few distinct characters. Obviously, that's not thoughtful typing. And then people also type very long strings. Again, if you look at it, it's obviously it's gibberish. Okay, so then we need to find a way to automatically detect such data. So we develop a 2 approach. One is based on regular expressions, and then we should target at each of those 4 categories. And then we develop another strategy using spell checker. So because basically we will keep any words that are correct or that are correctable. We will throw out words that are not correctable. Okay. And next, so then once we process the data this way, we get filtered data. We have the original data. Then we test those data against our implementation of the Gunati and the Picardi algorithm. So next, let me briefly introduce how the algorithm works. So here is the picture shows the data. So at the conceptual level, the data is very simple. So basically, it's a time series of characters, and as well as for each character, each key, we also record the timestamp when the key was pressed. So as a result, you can easily calculate the duration for a diagraph, right? So here shows the example, two samples, E1 and E2. So E1, let's say E1 is for the word authentication and E2 is for the word theoretical. And then we capture the key-press time for each letter. So that's the key-press time for A is 0, and then key-press time for U is 180. Then the duration for the diagraph AU is 180 milliseconds, and so on, right? And then we partition the user. We group the user's data into samples. Right now, each sample consists of 1,000 keystrokes. And then we also build a profile for each user, which consists of 10 samples for the users. Okay, and then basically, given a new sample, we compare that new sample against the samples inside a user's profile. And two distance measures are used by Picardi and Guidetti, A measure and R measure. So very simply, so the A measure measure the so given two samples, and you can collect all the diagraph appear in both of them. Then you can also find diagraphs that are shared by them. And for each diagraph, you can calculate the average diagraph duration. Let's say the average duration for CA inside of E1 is 280. Average duration for inside of E2 is 200. And then we calculate a ratio between these two durations. And you get a ratio 1.4 here. And then a threshold is determined 1.25. So if the ratio is less than 1.25, then we consider this two samples are similar with regard to this diagraph. Okay, then you can count the similarity between two samples are defined as the ratio of similar diagraphs. Okay, so here we have 5 diagraphs, and then 2 of them are considered similar. So the similarity would be 2 over 5. Okay, or if, and the distance would be 1 minus 2 over 5. Okay, so this is how you measure. This is the meaning of the A measure. Another measure of similarity is disorder. Okay, disorder. So we rank the diagraph for each samples, by their durations, and then the difference in their ranking for a given diagraph can be calculated. For example, the difference of IC, okay, in E1 and IC in E2. So in IC in E1, IC is ranked 1, and in E2, IC is ranked 4. So the difference is 3. Okay, and then we sum up all the differences and then divide by the maximum difference. This measure of disorder, it can be used as a similarity measurement. So in summary, we have A measure and then R measure. Okay, and then the algorithm basically combine these two, to measure the similarity between any samples. Okay, and then for user authentication, a sample X, okay, is claimed to belong to a user U. Okay, and then the algorithm will rank all the users by the distance between X and the profile samples. Okay, and we'll pick let V be the user that has the smallest distance, or V be the user who most similar to X. And then if U equal to X, then we will accept X, otherwise we will reject it. Okay. So this is the authentication algorithm, how it works in general. And then we measure false acceptance rate and then false rejection rate for each user. Okay. And so here's are the evaluation results. So we want to test different filtering strategies. So the first group of filtering strategy is filtering the data using regular expression. So we have, remember that we have 4 kinds of patterns: repetition, gaming, distinct, and length. And then we also combine all 4 strategies. So we end up with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different data. And then and the first one, this one is the raw data without filtering. Okay, this is the blue one. And then there's a chart here. The y-axis represent FAR, false acceptance rate, and the x-axis are the users. Okay, and visually you can see that there's no much difference with or without filtering in terms of FAR, and we indeed we perform a statistical testing, and we were not able to see to conclude there's a significant difference. So. And then we compare. We add a spell checker. So previously in the last testing we tested the regular expression. Now we add a spell checker, and then we combine spell checker and regular expression. So we end up with 4 scenarios. Again, the impact of filtering on FAR is not significant. Okay. However, the impact on FR, false rejection rate, is statistically significant. Okay, so this chart shows that the regular expression filtering. Okay, this blue line is the FAR for the the raw data, okay, and then let's look at this one, the combined filtering. You will see that the combined filtering in general is the for each user is the has the lowest value, although it's the difference is small. But the difference is statistically significant. Okay, and then spell checker is more effective. So when we combine spell checker and regular expression, so the purple line here is the FR for combination of regular expression and spell checker. And visually you can see that for a lot of users, the improvement is visually visible. And indeed, when we we also confirmed that it is the difference is statistically significant. So in summary, actually in the paper we also investigate why. So we have, but I refer you to the paper to see the details if you are interested. In summary, we collect a large data set for free text. And we found that the data set contains a significant amount of gibberish text. For example, when people play games, and 23%. And the gibberish text has no impact on false acceptance rate. So it does not damage the security, but it does have impact on false rejection rate. So by filtering out the gibberish text, we reduce the false rejection rate and would make the keystroke authentication more usable and more user-friendly. Thank you for your attention.
Could you go back to slide number 8? Okay, so what I noticed here is that actually in most of the cases, these performance performance measures are almost the same. I mean, there's some variation, but not so much.
Yeah.
What is interesting for me is that very often there are high differences for one particular user.
This is right.
And it was the same on the previous slides also. So could you comment on this? The same user has the problem here.
Yeah, I agree. Actually, not only one. Maybe this one.
You can see that for most of the people, it's actually the same as before. The question is, what happens for user 14?
And 22.
No, for 22, there's a spike, but the results are consistent. But for 14, you have different levels depending on the filtering.
If my memory serves me well, I did look at those users' data carefully, and one possible reason is after filtering, that user do not actually have a lot of meaningful data.
So how do you conclude that it's? Because I mean, basically here on this chart, I don't see any significant differences with respect to the previous chart regarding false acceptance rate. The main difference is that for this user, there's a discrepancy between filtered and unfiltered samples.
So here, see, but apparently for this user, the stronger filtering make a larger difference, right?
Yes, but the question is why?
I don't know.
Okay.
Another question?
Yeah, we basically perform analysis in the paper, but I have to admit that we feel that we're getting at it, but we have not completely nailed it down. So, yeah.
Okay, I think this is something interesting to look at.
Yeah. All right.
But we can see some consistency still. On the other user, you can see that it decreased for, if you compare for false rejection rate and false acceptance rate, you see that for the false rejection rate, you have a consistency with improved filtering.
No, my point is like this. Here the idea was that we should take a look at filtered data because there are some interesting conclusions. And now when I look at this, for most of the users, there are not so much differences if you filter or not.
Well, for this, let's look at this one. See, the difference is like 10%.
Okay, I agree. For some users, the differences are there are some differences. For this user, there are no differences.
Let's see, at least 1 or 2%.
Okay, but do you have any confidence intervals?
No, we did not.
So how do I know? This is not necessarily a big difference. Without specific statistical data, from this chart I can see nothing.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, because in this case there are some variations, of course, but the highest variation that I see is for user 14.
Yeah.
So this is naturally something that I would look at the beginning. I mean, that's all of my comment. I'm not saying it's bad. I'm not saying it's good. I'm just saying that this is something worth looking at.
That's completely fine. Yeah. So we can.
I have a question. If I will type my password in this, would you consider it as gibberish text, or would you use it?
Well, yeah, I will consider that gibberish. That's a limitation. Yeah.
But it can be that if my password is kind of complicated, I will be the only one that is able to type this password as fast as. So it can be something that helps also to identify me. Of course, it has to be private, but the way I type it is something that might be useful for identification.
Yes, I agree. Definitely, the filtering is very, preliminary. I mean, we thought about it. There's no obvious, perfect solution because let's see, password is one. Think about, somebody is programming, right? How do you handle that? We do not have a good solution for that yet. This is just an indication that, quality doesn't matter. But we will not claim this is the final solution.
Okay, so let's thank the speaker again. And I think it's time for lunch. There's gonna be a IFSTC meeting, I guess, Patricio? Yes, okay. In the same meeting room, so just here, on the next one. Okay.
See you after the lunch.